It was a quiet evening, and the streets were nearly empty as a golden retriever wandered aimlessly, his tail wagging with a mix of hope and uncertainty. He had no collar, no sign of an owner nearby, just a pair of soulful eyes scanning for kindness. Across the street, a man stepped out of a sleek black car, his face partially hidden beneath a baseball cap. To anyone else, he might have looked like just another passerby, but to fans around the world, he was instantly recognizable. Not that the dog cared. The retriever hesitated, sniffing the air before trotting cautiously toward the stranger. The man noticed him almost immediately, his expression softening as he crouched down to greet the curious pup. "Hey there, buddy," he said, his voice warm and inviting. The dog wagged his tail harder, nudging the man's hand with his nose. It was as if he decided in that moment that this stranger was someone he could trust. But what the man didn't expect was what happened next. When he stood up and began walking toward his home, the dog followed determined, unwavering, and completely unaware of who this man really was. As the pair made their way through the dimly lit streets, neighbors peeked out of windows, whispering excitedly. Who was this man? And why had the dog chosen him? Little did anyone know, this chance encounter was about to turn into a story that would melt hearts everywhere. But for now, the night was full of questions, and the answers were just around the corner. The dog's paws patted softly against the pavement as he stayed close behind the man, his nose occasionally brushing the back of the stranger's shoes. The man glanced over his shoulder more than once, a curious smile playing on his lips. It wasn't every day that a dog decided to follow him home, and something about this golden retriever tugged at his heart. "You really don't have anywhere else to be, huh?" the man muttered, slowing his pace. The dog's tail wagged in response, as if to say, "Not anymore." The pair reached a large iron gate, the kind that usually deterred unwanted visitors. With a press of a button on a sleek remote, the gate swung open, revealing a sprawling modern house bathed in soft golden light. The man paused, kneeling to get a better look at his unexpected companion. "I don't suppose you know what you're getting yourself into," he said, scratching behind the dog's ears. The dog leaned into his touch, letting out a soft whine. Inside the house, the space was as grand as the exterior, a seamless blend of comfort and style, with high ceilings and walls adorned with photos and awards. The dog, unfazed by the luxury, sniffed cautiously at everything he passed, his tail sweeping the air like a feather duster. The man grabbed a bowl from the kitchen and filled it with water. "Here you go," he said, setting it down on the floor. The dog drank eagerly, pausing only to glance up with what seemed like gratitude in his eyes. But as the night went on, the man began to feel uneasy. He couldn't shake the thought that someone out there might be missing this dog. The retriever wasn't just friendly, he was clearly well cared for, his coat clean and his demeanor gentle. Someone had to be looking for him. Pulling out his phone, the man snapped a few pictures of the dog and posted them online with a message. "Found this sweet guy wandering near Oakwood." No collar, no tags. Anyone know who he belongs to? He didn't expect the flood of responses that followed. Within minutes, fans of the actor recognized him in the photo. Comments poured in, some offering to help find the dog's owner, others simply marveling at the unexpected glimpse into the celebrity's private life. But among the messages, one stood out. A user claimed the dog might have been deliberately abandoned, explaining that they'd seen a similar dog being driven away from a park just days earlier. The man's chest tightened as he read the details. Who could abandon such a loving creature? Meanwhile, the dog had made himself at home, curling up on a plush rug near the fireplace. He looked peaceful, but the man couldn't help wondering what this dog had been through before their paths crossed. The next morning, the man decided to visit the park mentioned in the message. The dog bounded eagerly beside him, his golden coat gleaming in the sunlight. At the park, he approached a few regulars, showing them the photos he'd taken. Most shook their heads, but one elderly woman squinted at the screen before nodding. "I've seen that dog before," she said, her voice tinged with sadness. "He used to come here every day with a woman. But it's been weeks since I've seen her. She always seemed troubled." The man's brow furrowed. "Troubled?" What did that mean? Back at home, the mystery deepened. He scoured local news sites, searching for any stories that might explain the dog's sudden appearance. That's when he stumbled upon a small, easily overlooked article about a woman who had recently moved out of town under difficult circumstances. The woman had a golden retriever. No name, no photo, just the detail of a dog that matched his new companion's description. As he dug deeper, the man found himself growing more attached to the dog. Every wag of the tail, every nuzzle, every playful bark felt like a gift. And yet, the thought of the dog's past, of what he might have lost, nagged at him. The next few days brought more surprises. While walking the dog through his neighborhood, the man noticed a sleek car parked across the street, its tinted windows impossible to see through. It was there again the next day. And the next. The man's instincts kicked in. Was someone watching him? Or worse, watching the dog? He couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't just a coincidence. One night, as he was locking up, the dog suddenly perked up, growling softly. The man followed the dog's gaze to the window, where he thought he saw a shadow move just out of sight. His heart raced as he closed the curtains, his mind racing with questions. Who was the woman in the article? Was she connected to the people in the car? And why did it feel like this dog had stumbled into his life for a reason far bigger than either of them could have imagined? For now, the man decided to stay vigilant. He wasn't sure what he'd gotten himself into, but one thing was certain: he wasn't letting anything happen to this dog. Whatever secrets the golden retriever carried, they would face them together. The tension in the house lingered long after the shadow disappeared from the window. The man paced the living room, his thoughts racing as the golden retriever lay by his feet, his eyes alert and watchful. There was no denying it now, someone was watching them. But why? Was it about the dog? Or something else entirely? The next morning, the man decided he couldn't keep waiting for answers. He needed to take action. After a quick breakfast, he loaded the dog into his car and drove to the local animal shelter. If anyone knew about lost or abandoned pets in the area, it would be them. The shelter was a modest building tucked away on a quiet street. Inside, the air was filled with the sounds of barking dogs and meowing cats. A kind-faced woman at the front desk greeted him warmly. "How can I help you?" she asked, her eyes immediately falling to the golden retriever at his side. "I found this guy wandering near Oakwood a few days ago," the man explained. "I've posted about him online, but no one's come forward. I was hoping you might have some information." The woman nodded and led him to a small office. She scanned the dog with a microchip reader, but no results came up. "Unfortunately, it looks like he's not chipped," she said, frowning. "But I can check our records to see if anyone's reported a missing dog matching his description." As she typed away on her computer, the man couldn't help but feel a growing sense of unease. He had expected to find answers here, but so far there was nothing. Finally, the woman looked up. "We don't have any recent reports that match," she said. "But, tut, there's something odd. A few weeks ago, someone called asking about rehoming a golden retriever. They didn't leave much information, but it sounded like they were in a difficult situation. Could be connected." The man's mind raced. Could this be the same woman from the article he'd read? Was she the dog's original owner? "Do you have her contact information?" he asked. The woman shook her head. "I'm afraid not. She never followed up, and we don't keep records for inquiries like that." Disappointed but not deterred, the man thanked her and left the shelter. As he drove home, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was missing a crucial piece of the puzzle. That evening, the car with the tinted windows was back. This time, the man decided he couldn't ignore it any longer. Leaving the dog inside, he stepped out and approached the vehicle. As he got closer, the driver's side window rolled down, revealing a man in his mid-40s with sharp features and a calm, almost calculated demeanor. "Can I help you?" the man asked, his tone polite but guarded. The stranger smiled faintly. "Just admiring the neighborhood," he said. "It's a nice area." The man wasn't convinced. "You've been parked here for days." What are you really doing?" The stranger's smile faded. "I think you know," he said simply. Before the man could respond, the car pulled away, leaving him standing in the middle of the street, his heart pounding. Back inside, the golden retriever greeted him with a wagging tail, completely unaware of the tension outside. The man knelt down, running a hand through the dog's soft fur. "What's your story, buddy?" he murmured. "And why does it feel like someone doesn't want me to find out?" Over the next few days, the man kept a close eye on his surroundings. The car didn't return, but the feeling of being watched never fully left. Determined to uncover the truth, he decided to revisit the article about the woman who had left town. This time, he noticed a small detail he'd missed before: the name of the town she had moved to. It wasn't far, a couple of hours' drive at most. Grabbing his keys, he decided to make the trip. The drive was uneventful, the golden retriever resting quietly in the back seat. When they arrived, the town was smaller than he'd expected, with just a few main streets and a handful of shops. He stopped at a local diner, hoping someone might recognize the woman's description. To his surprise, the waitress immediately knew who he was talking about. "Oh, you mean Claire?" she said. "She moved here not too long ago. Lives in the little house at the end of Maple Street." The man thanked her and made his way to the address. The house was modest but well kept, with a small garden out front. As he approached the door, the golden retriever began wagging his tail excitedly, pulling at the leash. Before he could knock, the door opened. A woman stood there, her face pale and her eyes wide with shock. "Max?" she whispered, her gaze fixed on the dog. The retriever barked happily, his tail wagging so hard it looked like it might fall off. The man stepped back, letting the dog rush forward to greet her. Tears streamed down the woman's face as she knelt down, wrapping her arms around the dog. "I thought I'd lost you," she sobbed. Over the next hour, the woman, Claire, explained everything. She had been going through a difficult time: financial struggles, a bad breakup, and the pressure of starting over in a new town. She had tried to do what was best for Max, but leaving him behind had been the hardest decision she'd ever made. The man listened quietly, his heart aching for both of them. When she finished, he nodded. "He's been waiting for you," he said simply. Claire smiled through her tears. "Thank you," she said, "for taking care of him, for bringing him back to me." As the man drove home that evening, the car felt emptier without Max. But his heart was full, knowing the dog was where he belonged. The experience left him with a renewed sense of purpose. Sometimes, life brought unexpected challenges and connections, and it was up to us to rise to the occasion. Max had reminded him of the power of loyalty, love, and second chances, and that was a lesson he wouldn't soon forget. Back at home, the man sat by the fireplace, the room quiet and still. He smiled, thinking of Max and Claire, and the strange series of events that had brought them all together. Life was full of mysteries, but sometimes the answers were worth the wait.